Purdue. This is a new recap kind of tone for us. Only the second loss for Purdue this season. They're coming off of a 2-point road loss to UCLA, 69-67. The Bruins took them down. Um, a lot to talk about from this game. I thought, this is a little bit of an interesting game. I know we've talked a little bit offline. We both kind of disagreed a little bit with some of the decisions that were made, especially down the stretch and you know defensively game planning wise. So as always, we are here to kind of recap it all and break it down and kind of talk about what went wrong. I mean, because let's face it, at the end of the day, when this Purdue team loses to UCLA, I think in the fashion that they did, things went wrong. So it's important to talk about them. And I mean, this is a game that Purdue, I think arguably the two stars are playing hurt, but that's kind of up for debate. And this team got beat schematically. This is a kind of Mick Cronin masterclass. Donovan Dent got whatever he wanted and looked like the All-American player he was billed to be coming into this year. And we even got a surprise burst out of a familiar face in Xavier Booker. So, what did you kind of make of this game? What are your initial takeaways? What did you see?
Yeah, this recap is going to be a little bit different than some of the ones we've done previously. Joey and I discussed before this that we want to focus more on some of the schematic stuff, and we'll get into some player-specific stuff at the end. But for the bulk of this, I thought the coaching was the story. Mick Cronin made some headlines throughout the week complaining about Big Ten and his own players and how they all suck and he doesn't like any of them and doing his usual Mick Cronin shtick. And much like last year, it kind of worked. Cronin went on some rant in the post-game presser last year, and then UCLA rattled off like 7 straight wins. He rattled off a rant in a post-game presser this week about how all of his players are soft and you wish he'd never brought any of them to the building. And then they go out and they beat the number 4 team in the country in a pretty gutsy homestand. Maybe something we didn't talk about enough in the preview was how desperate UCLA was going to be in this spot. The last 3 games Purdue's played really against Iowa, USC, and UCLA were teams desperately looking for a win in big spots where losses would put them way down and out in terms of not just Big Ten standings, but also tournament hopes. And UCLA is going to be right back on the right side of the bubble after this win. And Donovan Dent's the main reason why.
Yeah, that was the UCLA team that we kind of expected, I think, coming into the season. The team that everyone had ranked in the top 15. And I think we had it just on the outside looking in. But, we were both kind of the belief that, like, hey, this might not be a top 12 team, but this is still a top 20 talent-wise, roster-wise team. And it didn't quite work out for them that way, or at least hasn't yet. But if they got what they got last night from guys like Donovan Dent and Tyler Bilodeau, that team's awesome. They have a legit All-American guard. They have an all-conference front court piece in Bilodeau, who's a 6'9" sniper. Daly's a really good piece that I don't think actually kind of took advantage. He was honestly, in my opinion, the scariest guy for Purdue matchup-wise, and he really didn't even take advantage of it as much as they thought he could have. He still had a good game, had 12 points, was 6 for 10 from 2-point range. Those were really the 3 guys that got Purdue. Perry hit a couple shots early. I mean, this is a game where UCLA played their starting 5. Like, UCLA's bench really didn't play much at all. The most played guy off the bench was Eric Freeney, the freshman 6'4" guard who played 8 minutes. Outside of that, like, the lowest amount of minutes any of their starters played was 34. And they rode their starters, and guys like Donovan Dent showed up. I mean, this is a team that has one of the most talented guards in the country. I mean, this is a guy that I think a lot of UCLA people thought was on Braden Smith's level coming into this year, and in this game he won. I mean, he exceeded Braden Smith's level. He was best player on the floor on Tuesday night, and I think that was the main reason why Purdue lost. I think in large part, though, because of how Purdue guarded UCLA, and I think this is a good kind of segue into the schematics of it. Really weird game plan. This is a guy that we talked about coming into the game, 4 for 26 on the year from 3. Not a guy that you're really worried about coming off of screens and hitting pull-up jumpers, because this entire year really, and kind of for most of his career, he hasn't been a jump shooter. It's definitely gone down this year, but he's not really a guy that's killed you ever in drop coverage by just hitting pull-up jumpers. And Purdue felt the need to hard hedge and even switch about half the time, and it killed Purdue on the short roll. And in the meantime, it really didn't even do what I think they set out to do, and that was keep Donovan Dent out of the lane. I think he took the hedge and got in the lane anyway. And defensively, to me, to my eyes, to my opinion, was a really odd game plan. What did you see from the game plan specifics, not individual matchups, but game plan wise? What do you see?
You mentioned it. This was the most bizarre defensive game plan I've seen Purdue deploy all season long. I really don't understand. This was maybe the worst way to guard this UCLA offense, independent of Purdue's personnel. And Purdue just doesn't have the personnel to defend like this. Clough and Jacobson both have their strengths as centers, but neither of them are super fleet of foot. And they were having Purdue hedge incredibly high up. I mean, they were running their centers towards the sideline with Dent, and then their big would just roll into the paint and force on the opposite block typically, and force the center, whether it was Clough or Jacobson, to come all the way back across the court to try and get back in the play. Typically, when you're hard hedging like that, it's to give your defense an advantage, to get the offense out of position, to take the rhythm away from the point guard. And if you have a center that's quick enough to get back to his man, you can recover back before the point guard is able to like get back under control and survey the landscape again. Defenses that are able to at least have deployed this with varying effectiveness against Braden Smith throughout his career, right? If they have a foot, like a quick footed five, that's typically what they're going to want to do because it gives you a huge advantage for the defender one on one with the point guard. But the problem is that Purdue's centers aren't fast enough to recover back to their guy, which means it's an easy pass to that big. And then there's one of three things that's going to happen. Either they're just going to take the basket themselves, which we saw Xavier Booker do, ironically, a couple of times. They're going to pass it out to an open shooter because Purdue's defense will have collapsed to defend the paint now that there's a guy with no one guarding him standing in the middle of it. Or he passes it right back to Dent, who then just charges right back into the lane with very little resistance and gets a layup or an easy shot near the rim, or passes it out to his shooter who's open. So it played into exactly what UCLA wants to do. And it felt like it was a game plan designed without the personnel in mind, both on both sides. This is like the worst way to defend Donovan Dent. Like you mentioned, you are not afraid of Dent pulling up from three. He did hit one in this game, but he was 10 for 18 from the field. Only three of those shots came from three. He wants to get downhill into the basket, and you're making it easier on him by hedging him instead of playing drop coverage. And then Clough and Jacobson, for as good as they are in various ways, just this is not their game.
Yeah, I mean, the 1-3 he did hit didn't even come against drop coverage. It came on a switch. I mean, TKR switched and Dent hit a little bit of a prayer. I mean, I guess it wasn't entirely a prayer, but it was a really, really, really tough shot. I mean, that was the shot that you're okay with Dent taking. And I mean, he made it, but as much process oriented discussion as we've had around it, I mean, that was the one play of the game, I think, defensively. You're like, trust the process. Like, dang, that's a guy who's 4 for 26 on the year coming into the game, 0 for 2 on the game, coming off a screen and just hit the tough one. But yeah, I mean, you said it. It was baffling. It really was. And I mean, I think I'm of the belief that blitzing and hard hedging screens on average is probably better against lower level point guards and even average college point guards. But when you're talking about the elite point guards in college basketball, those guys aren't sped up by the blitz. They don't struggle with the pressure. I mean, Purdue fans, it's the same way with Braden. Like when he gets blitzed off a ball screen, you don't feel like it really speeds him up or really affects him to some massive extent. And the same needs to be applied to other point guards around the country. Like Donovan Dent can also handle a blitz. He's also seen one. He's handled that before. Bennett Sturts has seen a blitz. He's handled that before. Like this, when you're dealing with other elite point guards, they also have other elite point guard skills. And so it's hard to just treat these elite point guards like they can't handle it. Like you can't just look at it and be like, oh, well, they thought they could get to Dent off the blitz. No, they couldn't. They didn't think that. Dent's too good for that. And then you saw UCLA really start to abuse Purdue with that twist action where they ghost the screen on one side, switch it to the other with Bilodeau, and he'd fade to the 3 point line. And between Clough and Jacobson, they just weren't quick enough to get back to the 3 point line, and that's exactly what happened on the last play of the game for UCLA. Set a little twist ball screen, Bilodeau pops. I mean, we could talk about like, yeah, Clough got a hand up a little bit, but to a Division I shooter shooting 50% on the game on 8 attempts, like that's not enough of a contest. That was wide open for Bilodeau's standards, and he made Purdue pay. And I think it's a defensive strategy that just, as you said, looking at both teams' personnels doesn't make sense. Like it doesn't make sense for UCLA's personnel, and it doesn't make sense for Purdue's personnel. It was a really baffling game plan, and I think this is kind of a good segue. The one time I thought the defense was good was when they kind of adjusted the game plan a little bit. They had Benter on the floor and just said, you know what, screw it, we're going to switch everything. And I thought there was a stretch where UCLA targeted Benter. They saw Jack Benter, as I'm sure a lot of teams do see Jack Benter, and they're like, oh, we can get to that guy defensively. And they switched him on to Donovan Dent. And 2 or 3 straight possessions, Benter sits in a stance and gets Purdue a stop, forces a tough shot from Donovan Dent. And it led to Purdue getting some separation. It led to a lead getting built. And
yeah,
I think it's a good transition in the conversation around Benter, but it felt like trying to force a group of personnel to play a scheme that they just didn't fit. And, when you did have the players that fit it, I thought it kind of worked a little bit, but just all in all, just a weird scheme to me to play true traditional fives like that.
Some people might be a little bit surprised we're focusing so much on the defense when Purdue only scored 67 points in this game. The offense was pretty good. We can maybe get into this a little bit more later if you want, but I don't know how much there's to say on the offensive side of the ball because this was the lowest number of possessions Purdue has played all season long. This is a 58 possession game. The lowest before this was 62 in the opener against Evansville. I mean, this was by far the lowest number of possessions Purdue has had in a game, and they scored 67 points. It's a pretty efficient offense. And that's despite shooting 26% from three. So Purdue was generating good looks basically all night. There were some scoring droughts. That was mostly shots not going in. There were a couple times where there would be a couple turnovers in a row. Purdue still only had 8 on the entire evening. 2 of those came in crunch time. We can talk about that later. But on the whole, this offense was fine, right? This is, and I know I've gotten on here before and kind of harped on the pace Purdue plays at and how much of a problem it is. This is why, right? The fewer possessions you have, the less margin for error you have. The reason you see teams get upset in March Madness that play like this is because when you play this few possessions and you have an off shooting night, this is the result that happens, right? And with so few possessions, UCLA's offense was also quite effective. And Donovan Dent had 23 points and 13 assists in this game. He also had 3 blocks, which was kind of crazy. He was really shutting down Purdue's guards in transition. He got whatever he wanted in this game because Purdue really never adjusted defensively to try and stop what UCLA was abusing in those ball screens with him and Bilodeau, especially in the last 10 minutes of the second half. But you mentioned Jack Benter. He came in, he checked into the game. His stat line won't wow you. He had 4 points, 2 for 4 from the floor, missed both of his threes. He had a rebound and an assist, and that was it. He took a charge on Dent at one point. I believe it was Dent he took the charge on. In that stretch you were talking about where they would get the switch on to Benter. He forced a couple of tough shots. One went in, one didn't. We've been circling this for a while with Benter, who is quietly become Purdue's most reliable player off the bench, I think pretty easily at this point. Jakari does what he does, and he's been pretty reliable for 5 points and 2 rebounds and assists every time he checks in for the most part. But Benter offers something that really no one else on the bench does, and that's positional versatility. Right now, he's mostly operating as Trey's backup, which was the role we all expected he or Murphy would claim, and it's obviously been Benter. And he can also play the 3, which presumably is what he'll play next year. Once Braden and Fletcher move on, and there's not 68 minutes between them that's being taken up every night. And in this game, he offered some stuff schematically that I thought really would have helped Purdue down the stretch. A lot of what we're talking about, even if Painter wanted to play this hard hedging style, move Trey to the 5. It's not like he got a lot of shot blocking in this game anyway. Chikari had one block, and that's the only block Purdue had all game. Um, it's not like Jacobson was offering you a ton of rim protection. Clough was getting abused and only had 4 rebounds. So it's not like you really needed the rebounding that he provided. Take them off the floor, put Trey at the 5, put Bender at the 4, and see that is much better designed to play switching hard hedging defense that Painter was trying to employ.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like, I think looking at this game, and I guess this is part of, I mean, not just looking at this game, but looking at the last month and a half or so, Jack Benner is like cemented himself as one of the top 6 players on this team. Like, I think at this point, there's a clear group of 6 that are just the best 6. And it's the 5 starters and Jack Benner. And however you want to kind of combine those lineups, like Jack Benner deserves to be talked about with that group of guys that like deserves meaningful minutes every game. Like he is a legit affects the outcome of the game every time he's on the floor because I mean you talk about positional versatility. Part of that he's just really good at everything on a basketball court. Like he's an elite shooter to this point in his career. On low volume, he's shooting like 56%. He's a really good rebounder. That doesn't get talked about enough, and I think that's part of the positional versatility thing is that you can play him at the 4 because he rebounds. Because if you played him 30 minutes at the 4, he'd go grab 8 rebounds a game. You have those 2 things by itself, like that's a good player, especially off the bench. And then you factor in what he's shown, the ability to kind of take guys off the dribble, that little behind the back he had into a floater this game. Like where was that? Or where did that come from? I didn't know he was capable of that. He's got some passing upside to him. Like there's some real stuff to Jack Benner catching, pump faking, 2 dribbles into the lane, kicking out to a shooter. That's a real thing. That's going to keep happening. It's going to happen for the next 3.5 years, or shorter as long as Benter doesn't leave. But this is like he's become such a complete basketball player already at this point in his career that he just deserves minutes because he can give you minutes at the 3, he can give you minutes at the 4, and he could play next to anybody in this Purdue rotation.
Yeah, I thought he was really good in this game, and the energy picks up whenever he's in the game because he plays so much harder than everyone else. And that's not even a slight to Purdue's other players. Like it's just who Jack Benner is. He's going to play harder than you every single minute he's on the floor. And looks like Purdue has their next great charge taker, which I'm sure rival Big Ten fans are really excited about. Another white guy with blonde hair who's going to fall to the ground in front of the basket and get the crowd fired up, taking on Fletcher Lawyer and Sasha Stefanovich's shoes there. But
I will say I feel like the charge he took on Dent was a little that one was a little like little Purdue guy special action. You know, that did for all the blocking calls we've seen this year on plays that I thought were much clearer charges. That one was definitely a friendly whistle, and it seems like he's already kind of getting under people's skin in that regard.
Oh, for sure. That was a little home cooking on the road, you could say, for sure. Reminds me of the Booker play from like the first half. Maybe the weirdest play I've ever seen. He drove through Jacobson's chest and got a layup. So like good for him, I guess. But he, I think, like carried. He definitely traveled at the end. Jacobson fouled him like 3 different times. They didn't call any of it, and then Booker got the benefit of that when the ball went in. So, hey, I mean, we talked about this a little bit in the preview. Both of these teams are really good at avoiding fouls, and neither of them draw many of them offensively. And that really played out. There were combined 18 fouls in this game from both teams for the entire game. It's 9 per half combined. This was a very clean, I guess you could say, game whistle wise. Part of the low possessions probably helps with that, but
on that note, tip of the hat, you know, kind of cheers to the officiating crew because for all the amount of times that we've seen officials rightly deserve criticism this year, I thought the game was pretty cleanly officiated. I thought it was pretty even. There were a couple of times each ways where you could have had something that could have gotten called, but overall I thought it was a clean game. I thought both teams kind of played conducive to that, and the officials just kind of let them play. This is a fun game to watch. It wasn't really a game that was marred by like fouls, and really outside of Purdue shooting 26% from three, like this is a really, really clean and not sloppy game. And I think,
Yeah.
the 3-point shooting you mentioned a little bit ago, the offense for Purdue, I thought the offense was good. I thought it was Purdue's offense. It just, Purdue's offense doesn't look like the best offense in the country when their 40% shooters shoot 26%. And that's just what happens. Like it's an offense designed around getting a bunch of guys good looks. And, unfortunately, the looks just didn't go in. And that's the kind of process element of this whole thing is that, well, for all the things that went wrong, you got to think shots are going to go in next time. Like you got to feel okay about what you did offensively because I don't think you really would want to change anything you did offensively. It's all defensively. I think where it needs to change for Purdue.
Yeah, I mean, other than Trakoff and Wren taking two of those threes, I feel like you feel pretty good about all the shots they get. And even the one was a cross court wide open corner
Yeah, I
pass,
mean
and the
the
other was
only
against the shot clock.
Yeah, like I
So I
think
mean,
even
if you're drawing this up on a whiteboard, you're like, well, why want those two shots to go to Fletcher or whatever? But in the moment, both of them were good shots. I mean, against the shot clock, desperation backup three is really never a good shot, but it's the only one you can get in that situation.
the only
Yeah,
thing I'd
and
say offensively is maybe even a little more TKR, but I think offensively, I mean, when Purdue had the ball, like UCLA was so adamant about not just sending a double on every post touch, not just on TKR, but Clough too. They loaded up the whole side of the floor they were on. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but like they're bringing the help side defender all the way underneath the basket. So it's not only just a double team, but even if you beat the double team, there's a third guy waiting for you at the rim. And I thought
for
Trey did a really good job of being patient and handling the double, handling the pressure, and kind of passing to shooters. Shots just didn't go in.
yeah, 10, 7, and 5 in this game. I mean, there was a stretch where it looked like he might be on triple double watch. And obviously Purdue's offense, there wasn't enough possessions, they weren't quite efficient enough for that. And you need to grab a few more rebounds. He only played 26 minutes. But yeah, I mean, for Purdue fans who want a little bit of a look ahead, this is a preview of what Nebraska is going to do against Purdue, where they send three guys to the paint on every post touch, and they are perfectly okay with pretty much anyone. I'm sure they'll leave one guy on Fletch. They're going to say, don't help off Fletch, help off anyone else. But short of that, they're going to be okay with anyone taking a three. They do not want guys getting to the rim off drives, and they definitely don't want post touches and trying to go through their centers. So Trey might have 10 assists in that game. He might only have 4 points, but he's going to be passing a lot. Clough as well. That's another game where I think Trey Coffin-Wren's playmaking ability is going to be really big. I mean, Clough has had his moments, but neither he nor Jacobson are really plus passers out of the post. So I expect Purdue's going to want a lot of those touches to go to Trey. But that's looking forward to Nebraska. This was a 2-point road loss to a team absolutely desperate for a win and whose star point guard finally played like it. I don't think there's a whole lot to hang your head about if you're Purdue. You're 7-1, still control your own destiny in the Big Ten. Still control your own destiny for a 1 seed, most likely. Feels like the Big Ten and the Big 12 are probably going to get one each, and if you win your conference, you're probably going to get it. So nothing to be too concerned about long term with this Purdue team, I don't think, outside of the weird schematic way this game ended. Definitely going to leave a bitter taste in Purdue's fans' mouth, especially after being up 6 with about a minute and a half left.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and obviously it's the Big Ten. Like every game matters, so that's why that being up 6 with a minute and a half left and losing that game really really hurts because that's one of those games where you feel like you didn't play your best, but on the road against a good team, you still had a chance to win a game, and a couple plays swing one direction instead of the other at the end of the game, and you come out with that tough road win. But I think that kind of does it schematically. But there's one more thing that we kind of talked about off air that we wanted to bring up, and that's a kind of odd situation currently surrounding Purdue stars. And this is stemming from the USC game a couple days ago, in which Braden took more than one shot. And he went back to the locker room after that first bump of the knees with, I think it was Cornish. Goes back to the locker room. I believe it was reported that he was seen after the game with a bunch of ice tape to his knee. Now, I didn't put a ton of stock into that because that's a pretty regular thing, even for guys that aren't injured, is to just be icing. But he certainly doesn't have the same burst and explosiveness that he's kind of shown. I think there's a little bit of like a hesitancy when he was in the air. He didn't. It didn't feel like he hung in the air as long as he usually does, with kind of the like jump, bail out, find a guy passes that he's kind of made look so routine in his 4 years at Purdue. And then on the other side, Mick Cronin straight out just came out and said Trey Kaufman-Renn was injured, which I mean, we could spend an hour and a half talking about Mick Cronin's press conference after this game by itself, because that was a trip. I mean, you couldn't have gotten a crazier trip if you took mushrooms. But anyway, I digress. Trying to recapture myself after thinking about the Mick Cronin press conference. But yeah, I mean, he flat out said like Trey Kaufman-Renn, that's the guy that's playing injured, and it makes sense. I think like that's a sensible explanation for what we've seen the last few weeks from Trey. It feels like a guy that's not moving quite as well as he has before, because he's going through some uncomfortableness, whether it's actual straight up pain or whether or not he's uncomfortable or whether or not he's just sore. Like there's kind of a lot of different things, but it sure seems like the hip injury that he dealt with that kept him out earlier this year or at the beginning of the season may be lingering a lot more than we thought. What's kind of your take on this whole situation? What do you see?
I don't think a lot of time needs to be spent on this, and I'm gonna check myself on that. So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this, but no, I mean, not the university, like the team hasn't really said anything about either injury, so I don't want to read too much into it. If there was like something major going on with them, Painter would have said something like, "Ah, he's dealing with whatever. Like he just got to play through it." It's typically something like Painter would say or whatever. He hasn't said anything like that about Trey. If you think back to the beginning of the season when it was announced he was going to miss those games, like he had the hip injury, wasn't going to play against Evansville, so wasn't going to play against Oakland. It didn't sound like the kind of injury that was just going to go away. And like if you recall, like before the Alabama game, you and I were on here talking about like how's Trey gonna look? Like how many minutes is he gonna play? Like Purdue should have a big rebounding advantage in this game, but he's not really a plus rebounder. Like what's that gonna look like? And then he went out and had like 19 and 15, and we all forgot that he missed 2 games to start the year with a hip injury that wasn't supposed to ever get better, right? So he was immediately incredible and looked like, oh yeah, this is the first team All-American that we all thought we were going to get. And then his scoring kind of dropped, his rebounding stayed high, and we're like, okay, he's settling into a new role, but the rebounding is up, he's passing, like he's locked in. And yeah, over the last 3 weeks or so, his production has taken a huge hit. A lot of the body language, like people have commented on, doesn't look great. And an injury would certainly explain that. Like if he re-aggravated his hip a couple weeks ago and is just playing through more pain now. But like I said, until we get some sort of confirmation from the coaching staff or from Trey himself if that's what's going on, it feels like speculation. As someone who covers sports, specifically the NFL for a living, I've certainly never heard an opposing coach break the news about a star player's injury. So this is either something that's been talked about behind the scenes, like Painter and Cronin, that Cronin mentioned in his press conference, not realizing that Painter was keeping this close to the vest, or it's him speculating based on what he saw. Either way, it's a little bit weird. If Trey never seems right the rest of the year, maybe it comes out after that. Yeah, he was playing hurt the whole time, but this doesn't seem like something that any of them are using as an excuse. So I don't think Purdue fans should either when talking about his play.
Yeah, I mean, I just think I agree with you. Like, if they're good enough to go play, like, especially like Braden, if he's good enough to go play 37 minutes, I mean, there's not much you can say. Like, he's not that hurt. And, it's the old cliche in sports. Like, you hear it a lot in football, but it's true in basketball and hockey and baseball and other major American sports as well. Like, to some extent, by the end of the year, everybody's hurt. Like, everybody's dealing with something. Everybody's got a nagging pain going on somewhere because it's a long season.
Rub some
It's a
dirt on it.
Exactly. And we'll see. It just felt like weird timing for it to come out like after Trey's best game in the last couple weeks. Like, feels like something you would have said after like the USC game or after the Iowa game or whatnot. And to top it all off, it makes it even more weird that it's Mick Cronin coming out and doing it for a guy that's not his own player. Like that just it's why it just throws it all into like this weird, like, what the hell is even happening loop? Because it's like, well, yeah, if Purdue thought it was a big deal, I'm sure they would have said something. And I'm sure that, if it was like truly affecting his play to that extent, like they'd come out and say it. And it's, with an opposing coach saying it, you don't even know if it's true. Like that could, Nick
Again, it could
Cronin
just
says a lot. Like he says a lot in his press conferences. Go back and watch this one. I recommend it. It's entertainment, but
it could just be his assumption. Like he knows Trey had the hip injury early in the year, and he was watching him out there during warm-ups or the game or whatever, and he's like, he doesn't look like he's moving right. I'm sure he's playing hurt, right?
There were a couple of like, I know you're not really on Twitter. There were a couple of tweets from like, not like, why am I blanking? Not like a Jeff Goodman tweet or anything, but like Joe Jackson, who I'm sure Purdue fans are familiar with. I don't want to unfairly attribute this. I think he put this out there. Mentioned that like the Iowa play when Trey kind of had the really weird, didn't really run back after the layup on the turnover from Clough that got clipped and went viral and thrown around social media. There were a couple of like smaller media accounts that were essentially, hey, he might not be 100% healthy. That looks like something where he felt something in his hip and realized going and chasing down a play that I'll likely just end up fouling on anyway might not be the best, kind of dangerous play to put myself in with my hip. And, I kind of felt like those posts were just like baseless speculation. Like, oh, they're just defending their guy. Like they like Trey, they're TKR guys. I'm a TK. I love TKR. Like, sure. But I didn't really put much stock into it. And I think, I don't know, maybe I'm putting a little bit more stock into it now that like maybe he has been dealing with something. And, as you said, like it's an injury that didn't really go away. He was just so good for the first month of the season that it's hard to be like, yeah, that's an obviously injured TKR.
Yeah.
He went to Tuscaloosa and gave Alabama 19 and 15. Like to some extent, he's healthy. Yeah, he's playing still. And, it was odd timing to come after what I thought was his best game in the last couple of weeks. So I think it's at least something to monitor going forward. But on that note, I feel like we've kind of accurately hit a lot of the major points from this UCLA game. Kind of, I thought to wrap it up, kind of centralize these thoughts. I thought it was something where the weaknesses shine for Purdue louder than the strengths. And that's really the first time since the Iowa State game and only really like the second or third time all year that I think that's been the case. So it'll be interesting to see how Purdue responds. They've got a big one coming up on Saturday against another top 10 team in Illinois coming to Mackey Arena. So no better opportunity to shut everyone up about any doubt and any kind of misunderstanding about what this team is. So on that note, be sure to tune in for the preview to that game that will be out shortly. And as always, thanks for listening, everyone.